Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. If you're able to come on camera, please do. But if not, that's okay. I'm Brittany Baker, the new Maryland Director for Chesapeake Climate Action Network, and I'm going to start off by introducing my team. Let's start off with Mustafa
Hi, everyone. My name is Mustafa Abdullah. I'm the Director of Campaigns and Strategies at the Chesapeake Climate Action Network.
and Kadest.
Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. I'm Kadesh. I am the new communications manager at CCAN, and you'll be getting a lot of calls from me throughout session to update you on any of the scoops related to our bills.
And Jamie, do you want to introduce yourself really
Hi.
quickly?
Yes. Jamie DeMarco, lobbyist for Chesapeake Climate Action Network. Sorry, I'm off camera. I'm in transit from a doctor's appointment, but I'll be at my desk soon.
Yes, and speaking of apologies, I apologize for my voice today, everyone. I've been sick all week, but I'm feeling pretty good and excited to share this information with you today. And so if you would like to introduce yourself in the chat, feel free to do that. We would appreciate it for our knowledge and also for everyone else on the call. You may or may not all know each other. And so today we're going to discuss the 2025 Maryland top climate and energy priorities, specifically three of Chesapeake Climate Action Network's priority bills, which are the Better Buildings Act, the Renew Act, and the Abundant Affordable Clean Energy Act. So to start off, we'll dig into the Better Buildings Act. And I want to make sure we keep this session tight because I know that you don't have an abundance of time and we appreciate your time with us. So to get started, the Better Buildings Act is this is its third year in session, and the sponsors again are Delegate Adrian Boafo and Senator Benjamin Brooks. And so the Better Buildings Act, we updated the language to make it very streamlined this year and really focus on one goal, which is requiring all new buildings under 35,000 square feet meeting their space and water heating needs without the use of fossil fuels. And so this is a building electrification bill specifically related to new construction. It does not relate to buildings that are already constructed. And also, in order to make sure that we kept all of the different conversations around building electrification separate, this bill no longer covers BEPS covered buildings, so 35,000 square feet and under. The bill also includes solar readiness language. So if your building is in a good spot where it gets lots of sunlight, we do want that roof ready for whenever there is solar mandates, or if the homeowner or building decides to go solar, it should be ready, but it does not require solar. And it does include energy efficiency standards to make sure that as we move forward in the clean energy transition, we're doing it in an efficient way by using heat pumps and not building out a lot of electric resistance equipment unnecessarily. And so the main mission of the Better Buildings Act is to ensure that Maryland's buildings are built smart from the start. And so the context. This idea was first included in the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022, but we were not able to get it through at the time. And so that's why we introduced it as a separate bill after we were successfully able to get Climate Solutions Now Act through. It complements the building energy performance standards, which I was just mentioning, and those finalized regulations are available now. I believe they were completed in December, and it also complements the zero emissions heating equipment standard that was part of the Governor Moore's June or July executive order. And it's also part of a broader movement. So there are over 130 other zero emissions ordinances across the US. at the state level and at the local government level. And on the slide, you can see the picture of some of the areas, the places with zero emissions ordinances, building ordinances in the Northeast. But you can get more information at buildingdecarb.org. And so 3 important things to know about the Better Buildings Act. 1, cost. In every scenario that you're building a brand new building, all electric new construction is cheaper to build than building a building that has both electric and gas utilities. The second thing, grid impact. Even in high electrification scenarios, the grid will grow at a slower rate from building electrification than it has in recent decades. So the grid can totally handle building electrification, and this is not going to increase the demand in a way that will be uncomfortable for Maryland. And last but not least, greenhouse gas reduction impact. Combustion of fossil fuels in buildings accounts for 16% of Maryland's emissions, and that's just combustion of fossil fuels in buildings. That is not related to the electricity consumption in the buildings. So once we fully accomplish transforming our buildings, we'll be in a very good place in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions reductions. But this particular bill, again, only relates to new construction. And the last thing I want to mention is the public health impact of the Better Buildings Act. Every time you're taking out fossil fuel appliances, you're benefiting the community. We do hope that this bill will discourage gas stoves in buildings. We are in coalition with many partners who are doing citizen science around testing gas stoves and their hazardous impacts to the people who live in the homes. This bill does not explicitly ban gas stoves, but we do hope that it will move us along, get us closer, start the conversation of getting gas stoves out of homes. Okay, so now we'll move on to the Renew Act, and that will be covered by Mustafa. And really quickly, I forgot to do this small housekeeping piece. If you have questions about the bills, feel free to capture them in the chat, but we'll also have question and answer at the end. Mustafa.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Brittany. So there are 2 things that are really important about the Renew Act. One is this is really about revenue raising. This is about revenue raising to cover the costs for the consequences of the climate crisis. And the second thing is, as I tell my 4-year-old daughter when she spills her milk, like you should clean up your own mess. It's a practice I want for her to have for the rest of her life, and to be able to take on that responsibility. And I think, and we think that our leadership and the fossil fuel companies should also model that behavior. And so for the Renew Act, we've got sponsors, Senator Katie Fry-Hester, Delegate Adrian Boafo, and Delegate David Fraser Hidalgo. And so the Renew Act would require any company that has emitted more than 1 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions from 1994 to 2023 and has a sufficient connection with Maryland to collectively pay just a one-time fee for the impacts of those emissions. And then the Maryland Department of the Environment would work with the comptroller and the treasurer to make sure that we determine the correct fee there. And that assessment would apply, we think, approximately to 40 companies. And so these funds will then be held in the Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Fund, which will support climate change adaptation and resilience projects all across the state. Really important thing to keep in mind, because we get this question a lot. Will the fossil fuel companies just pass off the cost to the consumers? The answer is no. This legislation does not allow for that, so they cannot pass on the cost to the consumers. And this is, again, it's not a tax. This is a fee that would be assessed to these companies, a one-time fee. And so there's a lot of things that the projects could go and the money could go and support. It could fund a lot of projects that are in dire straits in terms of funding right now. So this includes things from health resource equity communities, heat pumps for schools, and transportation innovation projects across the board. It's the one of the challenges that I laid out here is that the climate crisis, as we all know, is really costly to us. It's really costly to Marylanders. You can see that in Annapolis, the flooding in Annapolis cost businesses $160,000. And that in Prince George's County, they have the council there proposed a budget that includes nearly $150 million to protect our communities from climate change and reduce the impacts of flooding. I think St. Mary's County spends $950,000 a year to upgrade their stormwater management system. And Howard County is having to spend $228 million to build a bore underneath Ellicott City to alleviate the flooding. So this costs lots of money to our communities all across the state that they shouldn't have to be bearing the costs of. So our wonderful Senator Chris Van Hollen, was the initial sponsor of this legislation, I believe, back in 2000. He's reintroduced it every year, and he's going to be reintroducing it this legislative session. And then also, I believe about almost 2 years ago, Vermont passed their version of the Renew Act. And excitingly, Governor Hochul from New York just signed legislation this past month. And so we're following actually in the footsteps of our senator. We're following in the footsteps of Vermont and New York. And we're not the only one following in the footsteps. You can see Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Jersey, and California are also trying to follow in the footsteps. And so we want to be at the forefront of this and not fall behind. Regarding the Climate Change Commission, you all may have seen that recently they did a study and they recommended a passage of a bill like the Renew Act. The commission agrees with us that Maryland taxpayers should not have to pay the full cost of the constantly escalating climate change impacts in the state, whether it's from sea level rise, severe storms, and health impacts. And they also agree that we should assess a fee on major carbon polluters that cannot be transferred to consumers. We have robust support across the state from Democrats. Last year, we had 16 senators co-sponsor the legislation and 55 delegates. And so we're looking to continue to build on that this year. And lastly, this legislation is wildly popular. 68% of Marylanders across the state support the Renew Act, believe that we should be holding fossil fuel companies accountable, believe that they should be funding the costs of the climate crisis in Maryland. So we think that we have a mandate from community members across the state to move this forward. And in addition to our wide-ranging support from legislators across the state, we have a big coalition. One of our mottos at CCAN is to win, you have to build the biggest coalition possible. And so you can see we have organizations from the Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, from Indivisible and CASA, Mobilize Frederick, Third Act. We've got lots of groups across the state that are fully behind this legislation.
And that takes us to the Abundant, Affordable, Clean Energy Act of 2025, the third bill that we want to talk about today. And this is really important because energy is going to, specifically generation of new energy in the state of Maryland, is going to be a huge topic in 2025. And the most important thing to know in all conversations about generating new energy or providing new capacity, more capacity adequacy in Maryland, is that it is cheaper to do it with batteries and with clean energy than with conventional energy like gas plants. You go to the next slide. This is first of all, the overview of the bill is that is being introduced by Delegate Charkoudian on the House side and Senator Brooks on the Senate side. It moves us forward in terms of generating more clean energy, but it is a no regrets approach to solving the capacity problems that the state is facing that I'll get into in a second. But there's going to have to be some kind of solution to that problem this legislative session. And this is the smartest, most affordable, cleanest, no regrets option to address that problem. And the next graph will show the problem that we're facing. So as you may know, Maryland is part of the PJM grid. It is a grid that includes about 13 states and is run by a nonprofit organization, PJM, but that is largely controlled by utilities. What you're seeing is a graph of what's called the capacity markets. So essentially, when there's plenty of generation to meet all potential demand, these markets are low and they're cheap. But if there is a shortage where there is projected to be not as much capacity reserve as they like to have to make sure there are never any rolling blackouts, these prices spike to send price signals to developers that they should build and provide more. So as you can see, there is a huge spike in both the PJM's capacity markets overall, and the biggest spike is actually in the BGE service territory. This is a big problem. It's going to affect a lot. It's going to affect every ratepayer in Maryland significantly. It's going to be hard. People are already choosing between whether to put food on the table or pay their energy bill in the winter. Really, really difficult situations. Any increase is really financially horrible. And this is a pretty significant financial increase that's going to start this summer. So this is a problem that needs to be addressed, and the solution is generating more energy in Maryland, because that is the solution. The cause of this problem is PJM itself. PJM has the worst managed queue of any regional transmission organization in the nation. So, in order to connect, in order to be selling electricity to the grid, you first have to go through what's called PJM's interconnection queue. And that takes years and years and years. As you can see, there while PJM cleared 18 gigawatts of projects to interconnect in 2023, another 269 gigawatts are still bogged down in the queue. So people want to be building new energy. It is just being held up and delayed by this regulatory process that is taking way too long. And PJM has and the utilities that control it have a financial interest in blocking these new distributed energy resources from coming on the grid, because they can further subsidize and keep online their existing gas and coal plants longer if they're slow walking this. Other queues, other regional transmission organizations across the country have similar queues, also have queues, but PJM is the worst. In the entire nation, PJM is worse than any other RTO in terms of getting new power on the grid. So for a long time, they have been bottlenecking new energy coming on the grid. Now they're sounding the alarm bell that there's not enough energy on the grid. It's a problem of their own making, but there are solutions that we can come up with here in Maryland. So what the Abundant, Affordable, Clean Energy Act will do specifically is, one, deploy 1.6 or 1,600 megawatts of grid scale battery storage to the grid very quickly. Batteries can happen almost instantaneously, like within a year. It's a matter of months, not a matter of years, that these things get attached to the utility scale transmission lines. And there's two kinds of transmission lines. There's utility scale transmission lines, and then there's the distribution transmission lines, which are more like what we see around our homes. The other thing it would do is it would allow utilities to put smaller batteries at each substation. And that substation then effectively has a higher capacity. It can charge the battery at night when demand is low and discharge it during the day at peak hours. And so that creates a kind of what's called a virtual power plant, which is also a very affordable way to address capacity needs. It also improves how we invest in solar to deploy more in-state generation through solar. while also protecting ratepayers. This is not investing necessarily more dollars, this is investing smarter dollars. The system we have, the Renewable Portfolio Standard, has been a very effective policy, a very successful policy at jumpstarting the solar industry, but is actually not the best policy tool for scaling the solar industry, in part because there's so many different kinds of solar in the state now. And the current policy, it requires that we provide the same financial incentive per kilowatt hour to every kilowatt hour of utility scale solar as residential solar. And they are very different products with very different needs. It's really a bunch of different markets, and this new policy format called an administratively determined incentive, which is what New Jersey has, allows us to give each solar segment exactly what it needs to pencil financially, and no more, no less. So this is going to allow us to create more solar generation in state with spending fewer dollars per kilowatt hour, and also enacting ratepayer protections for the first time to make sure that on no one's energy bill, they're not spending more than 5% of their bill on clean energy. So this is the most important graph that I'm going to show you today. This is from a study commissioned by Google. Google is doing a lot of data center development. And so they're very interested in how much it costs to build new energy, because the limiting factor on new data centers really is energy generation. And they looked at 3 different options for meeting new capacity needs for a grid. One is building a conventional gas plant, another is a utility scale battery, and the third is a virtual power plant. As you will see, both a virtual power plant and a utility scale battery are cheaper to build and can be built faster than a gas plant. A gas plant is the most expensive, slowest option for meeting our new capacity needs. And that is not according to us. That's not according to an environmental organization. That is according to Brattle, a well-respected energy expert firm commissioned by Google, who is really just looking at the numbers of, if we need to add, gigawatts of demand to the grid, what's the cheapest, fastest way to create new generation or new capacity adequacy to that part of the grid. And we just know that gas plants take far too long. They take too long to build, and they are more expensive than clean alternatives. They are not going to meet our short-term energy needs. These prices are going up in 2025 for ratepayers across the state. I want to share a story that in Virginia, Dominion Energy in 2023, I think it was, summer of 2023, proposed building a new gas plant at a site where there had been power plants before, so it should be pretty easy to build. They said it would be operational in 2026. Here we are in 2025, and the current operating date proposed plan is 2030. So the idea that you can build a gas plant in 3 years, the utilities love to say that they can do it. They can't do it. And Dominion is still a vertically integrated utility. So they do this. This is their bread and butter. Utilities in Maryland are not vertically integrated utilities. And so they haven't built a gas plant in decades. They don't know how to do this. They have to relearn. If your goal is to help generation concerns in the 2020s, a gas plant is just off the table. It's too expensive and it takes too long.
Great. Thanks, Jamie, for that explanation of ACE. And so really quickly before we start to cover questions, some key dates for consideration. One, we are having our first day of session action at 11 a.m. on Lawyers Mall. I'm sure you'll receive a press release about that from our comms team, but I wanted to put that on everyone's radar. Also, the Gonzalez polling results for this year will be available early January. Again, you'll hear about all of this through our comms team, but I just want to give it to you today since we have you. And Vermont will be releasing their climate impact cost study from their Climate Superfund bill mid-January as well. We're excited to see that. We're not quite as excited as we were waiting for Governor Hochul to sign the New York bill, but that's going to be an exciting development as well. And feel free to save my information if you need it for any questions in the future or to get in touch with our team. And so to dive into questions, we have our first questions from Josh Kurtz in the chat. I'll start with a very quick question, which is, why did we choose the date range in the Renew Act, 1994 through 2023? And that's because 1994 was when the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change was ratified. And therefore, that was a solid date that we could say everyone in the world, globally, we agreed that we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so there were a lot of dates that we could have chosen, but we thought that was a good one, so that when we're holding companies strictly liable, we have a reason to hold them liable. You had the information, you knew that greenhouse gas needed to be reduced, and so you decided to continue using the product. And of course, 2023 is the most recent year of available data on their greenhouse gas emissions. And then another question from Josh Kurtz. Can we discuss what in the bill language would prevent fossil fuel companies from passing the cost along to consumers? What does it say and how would that work? Are there ways for fossil fuel companies to make a run around this provision? I'll get started, but then, no, actually, I'll go ahead and pass this to Jamie to give my voice a little break.
Yeah, thank you, Brittany. And great question, Josh. There's nothing in the bill that prohibits them from passing the cost on. We just know that financially it is impossible to do. And that's because this fee is being imposed on the largest oil producers and extractors, not the distributors. And I'll just break it down. There's two ways, there's really two oil prices. One is the oil market, the price of crude and refined oil, that's measured in terms of dollars per barrel. That is, internationally traded product. They're not able to move that up. They would love to. OPEC tries really hard to move that up, and even they've been failing to do that recently. But even these largest, most powerful international fossil fuel companies cannot move up the global price of oil. If they wanted to, it is set by supply and demand on a global scale, and nothing Maryland is going to do is going to affect that number. The other number that all of us interface with is the distribution charge in dollars per gallon that we see at our gas station. If we were just charging like a per sale tax per gallon of gasoline sold, that would show up on the distribution side. Because if you're a distributor, you would be selling your gas, you'd be paying an additional tax, and to cover that tax, you would increase your oil prices to compensate. However, if you are a distributor and you don't extract any oil, you're not one of the 40 companies affected by this, you buy the oil at the price of oil and you sell it at your commercial rate. So we've already established you cannot, these fossil fuel companies, the 40 affected by this bill, will not be able to affect the global price of oil. So if you are a distributor, unless you read about it in the newspaper, you won't actually know that this fee is being paid. You're not paying it, and you're not seeing it in any of the products that you're purchasing. If you chose to if you read about it in the newspaper, find out it's happening and choose to increase your prices, your competitors aren't going to be doing that unless you all illegally racket and raise your prices together. Your competitors are not going to be doing that. And so market forces will ensure that it cannot be passed on.
And also one more piece on that, Jamie, the amount that they will be assessed is proportional to their emissions. And unfortunately, their emissions is likely proportional to their revenue. And so the biggest companies that are making the most will be assessed the most, and smaller companies who are making less, and by less, I mean less in the scale of trillions or billions, they will be assessed less. So even though this sounds like a big fee that they will have to deal with, it's really chump change, even compared to their marketing budgets.
And it's not just us saying there's a comprehensive report done in New York that looked at their legislation, which found the same thing: the cost cannot be passed on. Market forces work the same in Maryland as they do in New York. I can try to share that report in the chat.
Christine Condon asked, how were other qualifications determined for which companies would be covered? So the qualifications for which companies are covered are actually very simple. You have to have produced 1 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions over the time span, 1994 to 2023. And then you also have to have sufficient nexus with Maryland. And that's just a legal, that's for legal reasons, because without that sufficient nexus, it doesn't make the legislation as strong. And then last but not least, we did take some of the entities that you would find within that out, like countries. We're not going to hold a country liable for this assessment because that's just overly political. How would you explain why we took like countries and cement companies out of the?
The one other qualification is that we said they have to be a fossil fuel company. If you just went over the 1 billion cumulative threshold, there are a few cement companies involved. And this is really trying to go after the companies that have contributed to climate change through fossil fuel combustion. I think that national oil companies, I mean, not the country themselves, but the national oil companies controlled by nations are affected by this legislation.
Right. Okay. 2 from Adam on Renew as well. Is there a cost estimate for the damages dating back to 1994? Good question, Adam. But one thing to consider is in the study that MDE, in partnership with the treasurer and the comptroller's office, completes, it will not be a retrospective assessment. Actually, MDE is going to have to define what years they're going to look at in terms of the cost impact study. That hasn't been determined yet. And then also, go ahead, Jamie.
No, finish your thought, Brittany. Sorry.
No, I was going to go to the next question.
Just one more on this is that it is incredible to us that we don't know how much climate change is costing us right now. We've tried to look into it. We've asked a lot of people. We've tried to add some numbers together so we know are some specific costs. We've added them up, but there has been no comprehensive analysis of how much climate change is costing Maryland. And this is not like an additional cost that we could pay if we wanted to meet our climate goals. This is costs we're paying today that are mandatory, that are coming out of budgets now and contributing to our overall budget crunch. This is not an additional cost we're trying to cover. This is us trying to find an equitable way to pay for the costs we're paying for right now and close the budget.
Thank you. The other question that Adam had is, it sounds like the bill language won't mirror the language that the Maryland Commission on Climate Change approved last month. Is he understanding that correctly? You want to take that or me, Jamie?
We think this does mirror the language that the Maryland Commission on Climate Change. We will conduct a study for the purpose of assessing a fee. And that is the recommendation of the commission, and that's what the bill will do.
All right, I'll hold some space for any last questions. Okay, well, thank you everyone again for joining us today. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your coverage of this important legislation and everything, all the other work you do. You keep all of us informed, and we really value that. So if you save my number, go ahead and text me so I can know that it's you. And have a great day. See you soon around Annapolis.
Bye, everybody.